Tier 1. The mainstream. Zodiac Killer. Imagine this. You're a teenager in 1969. You're sitting in your car with your girlfriend at a quiet, dark place called a lover's lane. The radio is playing soft music. You're laughing. Everything feels peaceful. But then, headlights behind you. A man walks towards your car. Then bang! That's what happened on one cold December night on Lake Herman Road. A shadowy man appeared from the dark and attacked two teenagers. They never made it home. Clearly, the Zodiac wasn't interested in letting people enjoy date night. In the late 1960s, Northern California was not prepared for what came next. A strange killer showed up and gave himself a name, Zodiac. But this was not a normal killer. This man turned murder into a game. He mostly went after couples sitting alone in cars at night. One second they were talking and smiling, and the next was gunshots. In another story, at Lake Berryessa, a young couple was having a picnic. Suddenly, a man in a black hood and a creepy symbol on his chest walked toward them and tied them with rope. Then he stabbed them again and again. The man survived and later told the police what the attacker looked like. But killing people wasn't enough for the Zodiac. He wanted attention. So he started sending letters to newspapers. These weren't normal letters. They had strange symbols as puzzles called ciphers. He laughed at the police and ended each letter with a scary crosshair symbol. One of his ciphers got cracked in 1969. It said, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild animals because man is the most dangerous animal of all." Yes, he said that. He thought hunting people was more fun than hunting animals. Police had clues, sketches, ciphers, handwriting samples, you name it. Everything except, the actual guy. There were phone calls right after the murders. There was a witness who described him as a big man with glasses. But nothing worked, and Zodiac always escaped. Then, in 1974, the letters suddenly stopped. Just like that, he was gone. He said he killed 37 people, but the police could only prove 5. But who knows how many more there were. The case went cold for decades. Police, puzzle experts, even normal people on the internet all tried to solve it. In 2020, which over 50 years later, one more cipher was finally decoded. But the biggest question is still unanswered. Who was the Zodiac? Some say it was Arthur Lee Allen, a school teacher. Others say Gary Francis Post. Even Ted Cruz was joked about online. Whoever he was, he might have looked normal. He could have been someone's dad, someone's neighbor. Maybe he died with a secret, or maybe he's still out there. But the Zodiac wasn't the first creepy killer who sent letters and scared a whole city. Almost 100 years earlier, there was someone even worse, Jack the Ripper. It's 1888 in London. The gas lamps cast long shadows through thick fog. Cobblestone streets glisten with rain. And somewhere in those winding Whitechapel alleys, a killer is choosing his next victim. Before CSI and DNA testing, before criminal profiling, there was Jack the Ripper, the original serial killer. Victorian London wasn't exactly paradise. The East End was basically an open sewer with people living in it. But even in a place where life was cheap, what Jack did shocked the entire world. In the Whitechapel slums, poor women started turning up slaughtered in ways that made tough police officers lose their lunch. Throats slashed ear to ear, bodies mutilated, organs removed with surgical precision. Whoever Jack was, he knew his way around the human body and knives. The unknown killer seemed to stalk the slums in the darkest hours, appearing and vanishing like a ghost. Just a normal hobby for a Victorian gentleman, apparently. The press went absolutely wild and made London into mass hysteria. Imagine Twitter, with top hats and monocles. Headlines screamed about the Whitechapel murderer. Copycat killers threatened similar crimes. Citizens formed vigilante patrols. And the police, well, they were about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Then the letters started arriving at newspaper offices. One boasted, "I'm not a butcher. I'm not a yid. But I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them." It was signed with a chilling new nickname, Jack the Ripper. Was it really from the killer, or just some Victorian troll looking for attention? We'll never know, but the name stuck like blood on cobblestones. Jack struck at least 5 times that autumn, each crime scene more horrific than the last. Then, as suddenly as the killings began, they stopped. The Ripper vanished into London folklore. And the theories? Well, everyone from local butchers to respected doctors were suspects. Even Queen Victoria's grandson, Prince Albert Victor, wasn't above suspicion. The investigation featured 19th century CSI techniques, like checking for blood under suspects' fingernails and, I'm not making this up, bringing in bloodhounds named Burgo and Barnaby that promptly lost the scent and ran away. Great job, boys. Over 130 years, more than 300 suspects have been examined, theorized about, and written into history. From the royal surgeon Sir William Gull to the Polish barber Aaron Kosminski to the American quack doctor Francis Tumblety, everyone had a theory. Everyone had the real answer. Yet not a single person was ever charged with the Ripper murders. Turns out it's pretty hard to catch a killer when your best forensic technique is take a good look at the body and scratch your head. The image of Jack, a caped figure escaping into the London fog with a bloody knife in hand, still haunts our collective nightmares. It's given us thousands of books, movies, TV shows, and the template for pretty much every serial killer trope since. So who was Jack the Ripper? A surgeon? A butcher? A royal? A lunatic? Truth died in those foggy streets long ago. But speaking of famous mysteries that took over the nation, let's move on to a story where everyone thinks they know the ending. But legally, it's still unsolved. It involves a football star, a white Bronco, and a pair of gloves that didn't quite fit. O.J. Simpson murder case. It was June 12, 1994 in Brentwood, California. A dog led a neighbor to something horrible outside a townhouse, and they found two people killed in a brutal way with blood everywhere. The victims were Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend, Ron Goldman. Just like that, America was watching one of the strangest murder cases ever. The main suspect was Nicole's ex-husband, a football star and actor, O.J. Simpson. Just your average sports legend turned murder suspect. At first, it seemed simple, but things quickly became strange. O.J. was supposed to go to the police, but instead, he drove away slowly in a white Ford Bronco. Millions watched live on TV as police followed him for hours. People literally ordered pizza to watch it live, because in 1994, this was Netflix. Eventually, O.J. gave himself up. Next came the trial of the century, a nickname for the biggest trial of its time. But this one truly earned the title. The evidence seemed clear. O.J.'s blood was found at the crime scene. The victim's blood was in his car and home. There was even a bloody glove at O.J.'s house matching one at the crime scene. But O.J. had his famous Dream Team lawyers, named by Johnny Cochran. They changed the story, saying the police planted evidence and were racist. Soon, the trial wasn't just about murder. It became about race, police corruption, celebrity power, and media madness. America was watching a country lose its mind live on television. Then came the most famous moment. O.J. struggled to put on a bloody glove, leather soaked in blood, dried stiff like jerky, and somehow that became reasonable doubt. Cochran said the famous words, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." But the funny thing is, the prosecution forgot that leather shrinks after getting soaked in blood. After 252 days, the jury took less than 4 hours to decide. O.J. was not guilty. Half of America celebrated. The other half was furious. More people watched this verdict than the moon landing. Officially, nobody was ever found guilty of these murders. Legally, the case is still unsolved. But later, in a different type of trial, O.J. was found responsible. He had to pay $33.5 million to the families of Nicole and Ron. So, legally, he wasn't a murderer. But legally, he was responsible. Yeah, confusing. Until he died in 2024, O.J. claimed he was still looking for the real killers. Usually somewhere between hole 3 and hole 9 on a golf course. Sure, some people had other theories. Maybe it was related to drugs. Maybe his son did it. But most people wondered how a man could leave his own blood from the crime scene to his home and still walk free. Nicole and Ron's families never got justice from criminal courts, and America never fully recovered from this case. But while O.J.'s case was about fame and power, our next story gets even darker. It involves the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The scary idea that the man convicted for it might not have acted alone. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was April 14th, 1968, just after 6 p.m. in Memphis, a single gunshot breaking the peaceful environment. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fell on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. The bullet went through his jaw and spine. 1 hour later, he was dead. After this, cities all over America erupted in anger. Streets filled with fire and rage. Police quickly began searching for a man named James Earl Ray. They caught Ray 2 months later at Heathrow Airport in London. He had a fake Canadian passport and nowhere left to run. Just like that, the case was closed. Neatly. Suspiciously neatly. as if someone wanted it solved too fast. At first, Ray admitted he killed Dr. King, but just 3 days later, he changed his mind. He said he was innocent. He claimed someone else set him up. And here's why people started asking questions. James Earl Ray wasn't exactly a secret agent. He once botched a gas station robbery. Now we're supposed to believe he escaped prison, traveled internationally, got a fake passport, and killed one of America's most protected leaders. It just didn't make sense. The official story says Ray shot Dr. King from a bathroom window across the street. But Ray said he was working for another man, someone called Raul. He claimed Raul framed him, and Ray wasn't the only one suspicious. Dr. King's own family thought something was wrong. His wife, Coretta Scott King, openly said Ray wasn't the killer. King's son even visited Ray in prison and told him directly, "I don't believe you killed my father." In 1997, the King family took their doubts to court, but not against Ray because he was already in prison. Instead, they sued a restaurant owner named Lloyd Jowers, and Jowers said he helped plan King's murder but wasn't alone. He said the Memphis police, the mafia, and even the US government were involved. The case went to court, and after only 3 hours, a jury came back and said it wasn't just Ray. They said it was a conspiracy, and the US government was part of it. Think about that. A real jury, not a conspiracy blogger online, officially said that the government was involved in killing Dr. King. The Justice Department looked into it and said they couldn't find any proof. But for a lot of people, especially King's own family, we found nothing sounded more like we're not looking. Dr. King wasn't only fighting for civil rights by that time. He was against the Vietnam War. He was about to start a huge movement to demand better lives for poor Americans. He wasn't just challenging the government, he was about to shake the whole system. James Earl Ray died in prison in 1998 while still claiming innocence. The fingerprints, rifle, and evidence still point to him. But was he really the shooter or just the scapegoat? Nobody knows for sure. The truth is hidden somewhere, in secret files, quiet conversations, and graves nobody wants to disturb. But if this story disturbs you, just wait. Next, we'll talk about a man who hijacked a plane, stole $200,000, jumped out into the darkness, and disappeared forever. The legend of D.B. Cooper is next. D.B. Cooper. It was November 24th, 1971, the night before Thanksgiving. A man wearing a dark suit and sunglasses got on a plane, Northwest Flight 305 in Portland. He looked like just another businessman heading to Seattle. He ordered a bourbon and soda, smoked a cigarette, and seemed calm. Just another boring flight. But then he passed a note to a flight attendant. She barely looked at it, thinking it was his phone number or something. He leaned closer and quietly said, "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." The note asked for $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes, and a friendly reminder about the bomb in his briefcase. Just a typical Wednesday request. He called himself Dan Cooper. He was polite and relaxed, like hijacking planes was totally normal. When the plane landed in Seattle, Cooper got exactly what he asked for. The money, parachutes, and he released all the passengers. But he kept the flight crew on board. Then he gave new instructions. Fly south, toward Mexico. He told them to fly low and slow. Somewhere over the forests of the Pacific Northwest, in the middle of a heavy storm, Cooper opened the plane's rear door and jumped out. He jumped into freezing rain, strong winds, and deep wilderness, wearing just his business suit, a raincoat, and regular shoes. No special gear, no helmet. Just a man holding a briefcase full of cash. After that, nothing. He disappeared completely. The FBI started a huge search. They checked thousands of suspects, searched miles of forest, but found nothing. D.B. Cooper had vanished completely. In fact, the only clue ever found was in 1980, when a young boy dug up some old $20 bills near the Columbia River. It was part of the ransom money, but no parachute, no briefcase, no bomb. Nothing else was found. Experts later guessed that the bomb was probably fake. But did Cooper survive? The FBI didn't think so. They said nobody could survive jumping into freezing rain and thick forests dressed like an office worker. It was like trying complicated surgery after watching a short video online. Impossible. But the fact that nobody found his body keeps the mystery alive. More than 1,000 people have been named as possible suspects over the years. Some thought Cooper was a former soldier or airline employee. Others said he was a skilled criminal. One popular theory was about a man named Robert Rackstraw, a former military parachutist. Another was Kenneth Christensen, a former airline worker who might have confessed before dying. And in 2020, 2 people even said it was their father, Richard McCoy Jr., who who hijacked another plane months after Cooper vanished. In 2016, the FBI officially closed the case. Today, D.B. Cooper's case is the only unsolved airplane hijacking in U.S. history. Cooper became legend, a modern Robin Hood who stole a fortune, hurt no one, and disappeared forever. But if you think a man vanishing into the night is scary, wait until you hear about our next story. It's about a young woman found cut in half, posed like a terrible artwork, and with a smile carved onto her face. The Black Dahlia. It was a cold morning in Los Angeles, January 1947. A mother was walking with her child when she saw something strange in an empty field. At first, she thought it was just a mannequin lying in the grass. But it wasn't a mannequin. It was the body of a young woman, cut neatly in half at the waist. She had no blood left in her body, and someone had washed her clean. The body was carefully posed, like someone wanted everyone to see it. The two halves were placed apart, her arms stretched above her head and legs spread wide. But the worst part was her mouth. It had been cut open from ear to ear. This wasn't just murder. This was a message. It was meant to shock people. The woman was a 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. She had come to Hollywood dreaming of becoming an actress. With her pale skin, black hair, and dark clothes, locals called her the Black Dahlia. Police quickly realized Elizabeth wasn't killed where she was found. There was no blood on the ground. The killer took time to torture and clean her body, then placed it openly in a busy neighborhood, wanting the whole city to see. And the city did see. Newspapers went wild. Every horrible detail was front-page news. Soon, Los Angeles was obsessed. Police got thousands of tips. Over 150 people even falsely confessed. Apparently, claiming to be a killer was popular in 1940s LA. Detectives investigated Elizabeth's life carefully. She often traveled, dated many men, and struggled to succeed in Hollywood. Some tried to blame her lifestyle, as if she deserved it. But really, she was just a young woman chasing her dreams. Until she met a monster. What caught investigators' attention was how cleanly her body was cut. No hacking, no mistakes. Her organs were untouched. The killer clearly knew anatomy. This pointed toward doctors, surgeons, or even butchers. More than 500 suspects appeared over the years. Doctors, businessmen, even famous people like Orson Welles. But one popular suspect was Dr. George Hodel, whose own son, a former detective, believed his father was the killer. Their house even had a creepy basement where possibly Elizabeth died. Other theories pointed to Jack Wilson, a known criminal, or the mob, because in 1940s LA, who wasn't shady? But what makes the Black Dahlia case unforgettable is how the killer turned murder into a horrible display. It worked, but not a single soul could decode the signature. But if this story makes you uncomfortable, our next one is even stranger. It's about 9 hikers found frozen in the Russian snow. Their tent mysteriously ripped open. Their bodies scattered everywhere. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. Tier 2. Conspiracies and Cult Classics. Dyatlov Pass incident. In February 1959, 9 hikers disappeared in the cold Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. A search team went looking for them and found something truly disturbing. First, they discovered the hikers' tent on a mountain called Kolatsyakl, meaning Dead Mountain. Yeah, not scary at all. The tent was cut open from the inside, which means something outside was so terrifying, 9 survival-trained hikers slashed their tent open and ran barefoot into a freezing blizzard. Inside the tents, everything looked normal. Clothes, shoes, food, even dinner half prepared. Whatever happened made them prefer freezing to death over staying safe inside. Searchers followed footprints from the tent. A mile away, under a big cedar tree, they found 2 hikers, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. Both wore only underwear, with burned hands and signs they'd tried climbing the tree, and they made a small fire nearby. Soon, 3 more bodies appeared between the tent and the tree. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They died from cold, but Rustem had a fractured skull. But 4 hikers were still missing. 2 months later, searchers finally found them under thick snow nearby. These 4 had even stranger injuries. Nikolai had a crushed skull. Alexander had strange head wounds. But the worst were Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov. Lyudmila's eyes, tongue, and lips were gone. Semyon had severe chest injuries, like from a car crash. but there were no signs of fighting or wounds outside their bodies. Even stranger, some of their clothes had high radiation. Some hikers had orange skin and gray hair, as if they'd aged overnight. The official Soviet statement: they died from a compelling natural force, which is Cold War code for "we have no idea and we'd like you to stop asking." There are many theories over the years. An avalanche? Maybe, but the slope wasn't steep enough, and the injuries don't match. A Yeti attack? Sounds crazy, but people actually believed it. Secret Soviet military tests? Possible. Radiation and strange lights seen that night support this. Infrasound? Scientists say the mountain could create sounds causing panic and confusion. In 2019, Russia reopened the case and blamed a small avalanche, but many still disagree. The footprints were clearly visible. No fresh snow covered them afterward, and the injuries still don't make sense. These weren't weekend campers, they were elite hikers, trained, prepared, and still, something made freezing to death look like the better option. Whatever really happened on Dead Mountain, those 9 hikers took the truth with them. But if you think this story is scary, our next case is even stranger. A young woman disappeared from a hotel elevator and was later found dead, floating in the hotel's water tank. ELISA Lam. It was January 2013 in downtown Los Angeles. A 21-year-old Canadian student named ELISA Lam checked into the Cecil Hotel. If you've heard of that place, you know it already had a dark history. People called it Hotel Death. ELISA was traveling alone and seemed excited about her California trip. She posted photos and updates online, but by the end of the month, she vanished. No calls, no texts, just gone. Her parents, who usually talk to her every day, got worried and called the police. Then the LAPD released security footage from one of the hotel elevators, and that's when things went from a missing person case to a full-on horror movie. In the video, ELISA steps into the elevator, presses a bunch of buttons, and then starts acting strange. She hides, peeks out like she's being followed. Her hands move like she's reaching for something that isn't there. She steps in and out of the elevator, but the doors, they never close. Not once. It's like the elevator itself is frozen. The internet exploded with theories. Some people saw shadowy shapes in the hallway. Others said she looked scared, not confused. Meanwhile, guests at the hotel started complaining. Low water pressure, weird taste. One person even said their water turned black for a few seconds. Then, on February 19th, a hotel worker climbed to the rooftop to check the water tanks. Inside one of them, floating face up, was ELISA. She had been in the hotel's water supply for weeks. Yes, people had been drinking, showering, and brushing their teeth with that water. The official story said it was an accident. She had a mental health episode, climbed into the tank herself, and drowned. But a lot of things don't make sense. First, the rooftop door was locked and had an alarm. You couldn't just walk up there. Second, the tanks were hard to open because the lids were heavy. And if she did climb in, how would she close it behind her? Third, why would anyone go into a water tank during a mental breakdown? So the theory started. Some believed someone at the hotel murdered her and covered it up. Others blamed the building itself. There are serial killers who had stayed there before. Maybe something dark was still there. Then, things got really weird. At the same time ELISA disappeared, there was a tuberculosis outbreak nearby. The test for that outbreak was named Lam ELISA, which was her name but reversed. Then there's Dark Water, a horror film from 2005 about a ghost girl, a rooftop tank, and black water. Sound familiar? And yes, the water turns black. Maybe coincidence, maybe something else. Either way, it doesn't sit right. In the end, maybe the saddest answer is the real one. Maybe ELISA was lost in her thoughts and got overwhelmed. Maybe she climbed up there and nobody noticed in time. The Cecil Hotel changed its name later, but that elevator video never left the internet. It plays on loop, her last moments frozen in time. And if you think one strange death is disturbing, wait until you hear about dozens. The smiley face murders. Imagine this. A popular college student goes out drinking with friends. He gets separated from the group and disappears into the night. Days or weeks later, his body is found floating in a nearby river or lake. Police say it was just another drunk kid who drowned. But what if these weren't accidents? What if someone or someones are turning college bars into hunting grounds? That's the disturbing theory from 2 retired NYPD detectives, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte. They believe at least 45 deaths from the late 1990s to the 2010s across the Midwest and Northeast were not accidents, but murders. According to them, the cases had a pattern. The victims are usually young men, college students, athletic, smart, well-liked. They're last seen leaving a bar or party, usually drunk. And here's the creepy part. Near many of the spots where their bodies were found, someone spray-painted a smiley face. Yes, that same little smiley face you saw on stickers or test papers as a kid. The detectives believe this is the killer's calling card, left to mock the police and take credit. They think these deaths were staged to look like accidents, that the victims were taken, murdered, and placed in water to cover up the truth. Take Chris Jenkins, for example. He was a student at the University of Minnesota. He disappeared on Halloween night in 2002. 4 months later, his body was found in the Mississippi River. Police first said it was an accident, but after more digging, his case was reclassified as a homicide. Or Patrick McNeil, a student from Fordham University. He vanished after leaving a Manhattan bar in 1997. Weeks later, his body was found in New York Harbor. The official report said it was a drowning incident, but Detective Gannon believes the evidence says otherwise. Still, most law enforcement agencies remain doubtful. The FBI reviewed several cases and said they found no real proof of a serial killer or gang. They pointed out that drunk young men near rivers often end up in accidents. That's tragic, but it happens. Also, critics say smiley face graffiti is everywhere. You could find one near almost any wall or bridge. It doesn't mean there's a killer nearby. And then there's the big question. Could a secret group really kill people across many states for years and never be caught? That sounds more like a spy movie than real life. Even so, many families of the victims don't believe the drowning stories. Some of the young men were afraid of water. Some were strong swimmers. Why would they suddenly walk into a river in freezing cold at night? Some autopsies also found strange drugs in their systems. Not the usual party drugs. Something else. Something that might suggest they were drugged on purpose. So, is this a real case of serial murder, or just random tragedies we've connected into a story? Until someone talks or gets caught, the smiley face killer remains an unsolved mystery and one of the most chilling urban legends in America. Tier 3. Cult Cases. Hinterkaifeck Murders. Imagine you're on a remote farm in 1922, Bavaria, Germany, surrounded by dark pine forests with no neighbors close enough to hear a scream. This place was called Hinterkaifeck, and it was home to the Gruber family. There were Grandpa Andreas, his wife Grandma Kazilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and Victoria's 2 kids, little Kazilia and Josef, and a new maid named Maria. Before the murders, strange things started happening. Andreas told neighbors he saw footprints in fresh snow coming out of the woods and leading to the house. But there were no prints going back, like someone walked in and stayed. He also heard strange noises in the attic, like footsteps at night. A newspaper showed up on the porch that no one in the family had bought, and their house keys started to go missing. The previous maid had quit months earlier. She believed the house was haunted. Maria, the new maid, arrived on March 31. That same day, the entire family was murdered. When no one had seen or heard from the Grubers for days, neighbors decided to visit the farm. What they found was horrifying. 4 family members, Andreas, Kazilia, Victoria, and young Kazilia, were found dead in the barn. Someone had lured them there, one by one, and killed them using a mattock. Inside the house, they found Maria and baby Josef. Both had been killed in their beds. And here's the part that haunts people. The killer didn't leave. Evidence showed someone stayed in the house for days after the murders. They fed the cows, ate food from the kitchen, even lit fires in the fireplace. Smoke had been seen rising from the chimney after the family was already dead. Whoever did this lived in the house with 6 dead bodies, like it was normal. Police questioned many people, but never solved the case. One theory said it was a jealous neighbor, angry over rumors that Andreas had an inappropriate relationship with Victoria. Many believed little Josef was their child. Others thought it might be a robber, but nothing valuable was taken. Some said it could have been a wandering serial killer, though that was rare in 1920s Germany. The crime was so shocking that the farmhouse was later torn down, as if the town wanted to erase the memory completely. So the next time you hear a strange noise above you, or notice something small go missing, just remember the Gruber family, and maybe double check your attic before it's too late. But if you think that's disturbing, wait until you hear about the next case. 2 elderly people found dead in their home, resting on the top of their own fridge. Icebox murders. This one happened in June 1965 in Houston, Texas. Police were called to 1815 Driscoll Street for a welfare check. The neighbors were worried. They hadn't seen the elderly couple who lived there, Fred and Edwina Rogers, for a few days. When the cops arrived, the house was locked, so they forced their way in. At first, everything looked normal. The house was clean. No blood, no signs of a struggle, just a quiet, tidy home. Then one officer, maybe looking for water, opened the fridge. What he found turned this case from weird to a full-on nightmare. Inside the refrigerator were neatly wrapped packages of meat, stacked perfectly, like something from a butcher shop. But when they looked closer, this wasn't beef. It wasn't pork. It was Fred and Edwina. Someone had chopped them up, wrapped the pieces in butcher paper, and placed them in the fridge like leftovers. Their heads were missing. As if that wasn't enough, the killer had flushed the couple's organs down the toilet. How did police know? Because the organs clogged the pipes. Yes, seriously, this wasn't murder. This was surgical. The bodies had been cut apart with care and skill. Clean, organized, almost professional. An autopsy showed Fred was beaten with a hammer, and Edwina had been shot in the head. After that, the killer took time to clean, cut, and carefully store everything. Here's the strange part. There was no forced entry, no robbery. Money and valuables were untouched. This wasn't about theft. It was personal, and all eyes turned to their 43-year-old son, Charles Rogers. Charles was unusual. He was a quiet, unemployed geophysicist who lived in the same house, but he barely spoke to his parents. He would leave notes under his bedroom door instead of talking. By the time police got there, Charles was gone. Inside his room, they found blood spatters and a blood-stained saw. It looked like someone had tried to clean it, but not very well. It seemed obvious. Charles killed his parents, chopped them up, and disappeared. But even with a big manhunt, Charles Rogers was never found. In 1975, he was declared legally dead, but that only made things weirder. One theory said Charles was involved in the JFK assassination and killed his parents because they knew too much. Because in Cold War America, if something's weird and unsolved, someone always has to drag JFK into it. It's a rule. Most likely, it was years of family problems. Fred was said to be abusive, so it was likely Charles spent years stuck in that house, and one day, he snapped. If he somehow survived, Charles would be close to 90 today, but most people think he's long gone, either by suicide or living under a fake identity somewhere far away. Technically, the case is still open, but unofficially, everyone thinks Charles did it. And if that story was disturbing, just wait, because next up, a Catholic priest vanishes, leaving behind a bloody car and a twisted coat hanger. The case of Father John Kerrigan is next, and it's seriously strange. Father John Kerrigan. It's summer, 1984, in Ronan, Montana, a tiny, quiet town inside the Flathead Indian Reservation, and not the kind of place where people just disappear. But that's exactly what happened. Father John Kerrigan had only been in town for 2 weeks, working at Sacred Heart Parish. One evening, he left the church to grab dinner at a local restaurant. Totally normal. After that, he drove into the night around 11 p.m., and then he never came back. The next day, police found his car abandoned outside of town. Inside the car was blood, a lot of it, smeared on the seats, dashboard, steering wheel, everywhere. It was clear something terrible had happened to Father Kerrigan, but then things got strange. Near the car, along the side of the highway, police found his personal items, but not thrown, arranged. His bloody clothes were folded neatly. His wallet and keys were placed nearby, almost like someone was leaving a message, or setting up a scene no one could understand. A week later, more of his things were found in a town nearby, still bloody. This time, it was his wallet again, plus a twisted coat hanger left behind a restaurant. Nobody could explain the hanger. No one even wanted to guess. Meanwhile, there was still no body. At first, some people wondered, did Father Kerrigan run away and start a new life? But the blood told a different story. Tests confirmed it was his blood. There was too much of it for him to survive, so that theory was out. Then came the bigger question. Why would someone hurt a priest? That's when the theories started. Some people looked at the church. Kerrigan had been moved between churches often, and that was seen as a red flag. Back then, it was not that big of a scandal because it was before the Catholic abuse scandals went public. But even in 1984, some people felt something was off. Others thought it might be a serial killer who targeted priests. Because 2 years earlier, another priest, Father Reynaldo Rivera, was murdered in New Mexico. He'd gone out to help someone and was never seen alive again. And it had too many similarities. A remote place and a Catholic victim. Another priest vanished. So the police quietly looked into it. Could it be the same person? If so, the motive was still a mystery. Revenge, hatred, or something even darker. The media even called the suspect the Catholic killer for a short time. But after no more priests disappeared, the name faded. In 1988, Father Kerrigan was declared legally dead. But the case is still open. And speaking of vanishing, our next story doesn't involve just one person. It's a whole family. The Jamisons set out to look at land in rural Oklahoma and were never seen alive again. And what they left behind? Well, that's next. And it's weird. Jamison family deaths. October 2009. The Jamison family, Bobby, Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, got into their truck for a short trip into the San Juan Mountains in Oklahoma. They were looking at land they wanted to buy for a fresh start. It should have been simple. Instead, it became one of America's strangest mysteries. Days later, their truck was found abandoned on a dirt road. And inside the truck, things made no sense. Their wallets, IDs, phones, and Sherilyn's purse were still there. Even their dog was found inside, nearly starving after days alone. Under the driver's seat was $32,000 in cash. Who leaves that kind of money behind? The truck showed no signs of violence, no blood, no bullet holes, nothing. It looked like the family had just stepped out for a moment and vanished into the forest. Police began a huge search. Helicopters, dogs, teams on horses, but they found nothing. No trace of the family at all. For 4 years, the Jamisons stayed missing, and people began sharing theories. Some thought it was a drug deal gone wrong, but then why was the money left behind? Others pointed out how strangely the family acted on security footage from their home. On the morning they left, Bobby and Sherilyn loaded their truck in complete silence. They looked like zombies, moving slowly, not speaking, not reacting, just loading the car again and again. It was like something else was controlling them. And things got even stranger. Sherilyn had become interested in witchcraft and ghosts. She painted weird messages on a storage container about dead cats and witches. The couple even told their pastor they saw spirits in their home and wanted an exorcism. In November 2013, hunters found human bones deep in the woods, just 3 miles from the truck. The bones belonged to Bobby, Sherilyn, and little Madison. Finally, the family was found, but their bodies were so decomposed that police couldn't figure out how they died. So what happened? Did they get lost and die from the cold? If so, why leave their truck filled with supplies and money? Were they murdered? By whom? And again, why leave behind $32,000? Did the family choose suicide? That still doesn't explain why they wandered so far away. Or was something supernatural involved? As Sherilyn feared, the strange security footage of them acting like robots still haunts everyone who sees it. People call the Jamison case the new American Gothic. All we know for sure is this. Something led the Jamisons deep into these woods, and whatever it wasn't friendly. But if you think a family disappearing in the woods is scary, wait until you hear about the Axeman of New Orleans. Tier 4. The Axeman of New Orleans. It's 1918 in New Orleans. World War I is ending, but another kind of terror is just beginning. Late at night, someone starts breaking into homes, mostly in Italian neighborhoods. The killer's method is always the same. Quietly chisel open the back door, slip inside, grab the homeowner's axe, and attack them while they sleep. This was the Axeman of New Orleans. His first victims were Italian grocer Joseph Maggio and his wife, Catherine. On May 23, 1918, their bodies were discovered with their heads nearly split open. Strangely, the killer had even washed the axe in their sink before leaving. Over the next year and a half, the Axeman struck at least 12 times, killing 6 people and badly injuring others. Almost all the victims were Italian grocers or their families. Why Italians? Why grocers? No one knew. But the real terror began when the killer sent a letter to the local newspaper in March 1919. In the letter, he declared, "They have never caught me, and they never will. I'm not human. I'm a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell." Yeah, not exactly comforting words. He also announced a plan. On the night of March 19, he'd strike again. But there was a twist. There was a way to survive. Every person whose home is playing jazz music will be safe. Yes, seriously. The supposed demon from hell liked jazz. The city panicked. On March 19, jazz music blasted from every home, club, and bar. People without instruments played records loudly. Some banged pots and pans. Everyone joined this weird citywide jazz party. And guess what? No one was killed that night. The Axeman, happy with all the music, and kept his word. But the murders continued a few months later. Then suddenly, nothing. The killings stopped in October 1919, and the Axeman was never seen again. There are many theories. Some thought the mafia was responsible, attacking grocers who refused to pay protection money. Others genuinely believed something supernatural was at work. The killer's strange letters certainly helped fuel that idea. One popular suspect was Joseph Mumfre. In 1921, a widow of one Axeman victim shot and killed Mumfre in Los Angeles, claiming he was the killer, but evidence linking him to the crimes was weak at best. Today, nobody knows who the Axeman was. Over 100 years later, evidence is gone, and everyone involved has passed away. Yet the story survives, especially the bizarre image of an entire city desperately playing jazz music to avoid becoming victims of a mysterious killer. Even now, on certain spring nights, New Orleans remembers. You might still hear jazz played louder than usual, as if the city's never forgotten the terror or the music that saved their lives. But axes aren't the only weapons leaving detectives confused. Our next case takes us to 1922, when two bodies were found under a crabapple tree in New Jersey. A secret love story turned deadly. Hall's Mills murder. It's a quiet path near New Brunswick, New Jersey, a peaceful little place called DeRussey's Lane. A couple is out walking when they see something strange under the crabapple tree. What they find is horrible. Two bodies lying side by side, a man and a woman. The woman's throat is cut ear to ear, so clean it looks like a surgeon did it, and the man was shot in the head. Around them were torn up love letters scattered like creepy confetti. It was a message. The victims were Reverend Edward Hall and Eleanor Mills. He was a pastor, and she sang in his church choir, and both of them were married, just not to each other. So yes, this was a secret affair, and someone clearly didn't approve. Their bodies were carefully posed, feet pointed toward the tree. Hall's hat covered his face. His calling card was placed at his feet. Right away, the first suspicion fell on Frances Hall, Edward's wife. She was older, very wealthy, and definitely had a reason to be upset. Oh, and she also had powerful friends and money to protect her. Frances's two brothers, Henry and Willie Stevens, also became suspects. Willie, in particular, had mental health issues, and that didn't help his case. But the investigation was a total disaster. The crime scene was between two countries, and neither police department knew who was in charge. While they argued, the public treated the site like a tourist stop. People walked through it, picked up clues, even posed for photos. One man was photographed holding Reverend Hall's calling card like a prize. This was not exactly a professional investigation. It took 4 years before anyone was even charged. By then, the press had turned it into a full-blown media circus. The 1926 trial of Frances Hall and her brothers became one of America's first big trials of the century. Every newspaper had a different take. Frances was either a cold-blooded killer or a woman betrayed by her husband. And then the most weird witness was the pig woman. Her real name was Jane Gibson, a local pig farmer. She claimed she saw the murders while riding her mule near the scene. She was sick with cancer and testified from a hospital bed they wheeled into the courtroom. But under pressure, her story kept changing. Each time she answered questions, the details changed, so the jury didn't believe her. In the end, Frances Hall and her brothers were found not guilty. The people in the courtroom cheered, but outside, many were angry. They believed money and power had brought them freedom. No one else was ever charged, and the theories never stopped. Was it Eleanor's husband, a jealous choir member, a stranger passing through? We may never know. The crabapple tree is long gone, but the mystery of the preacher and the choir singer still haunt New Jersey. Cindy Song. It was Halloween night, 2001, in State College, Pennsylvania. A typical college town full of costumes, music, and partying. One of its students, Cindy Song, went out with friends. She wore a full Playboy bunny outfit with bunny ears, fluffy tail, false eyelashes, the whole look. Photos show her smiling, dancing, and having fun. But by morning, she was gone. Cindy stayed out with her friends until almost 4 a.m. They dropped her off at her apartment and she waved goodbye and walked to the door. But that little wave was the last time anyone saw her. When Cindy didn't show up for class, her friends got worried and called the police. Officers went to her apartment and what they found inside was strange. Her phone and backpack were on the counter. Her false eyelashes were there too, like she'd just taken them off after a long night. But her keys, wallet, and part of her costume were missing. There were no signs of a break-in, no struggle. The door was locked. It looked like she had stepped outside for a minute and vanished. After that, the police started a full search. They questioned her friends, checked security cameras, used tracking dogs. Still nothing. No bank activity, no phone records, no signs of Cindy. Then there was a possible clue. A witness in Philadelphia, about 3 hours from her apartment, claimed they saw a young Asian woman who looked like Cindy. She seemed scared and was with a man who looked dangerous. She was crying for help before being forced into a car. It could have changed everything, but the witness kept changing their story. So eventually police stopped trusting the lead. Then in 2003, something huge happened. A man trying to cut a deal with police came forward with a wild story. He said Hugo Zelensky, a known criminal, had kidnapped a woman who looked like Cindy. He claimed they thought she was a night worker, kept her in a basement, and she didn't make it out alive. And one of them supposedly kept her bunny ears as a trophy. So police searched Zelensky's property. What they found was horrifying. They found multiple bodies buried in the yard. It finally seemed like the case was solved, but when forensics came back, none of the remains were Cindy. Zelensky went to prison for other murders, but Cindy's case is still unsolved. No charges, no evidence, no closure. So what really happened? Was she taken by a random predator? Was the Zelensky story true and her body hidden elsewhere? Or was there someone else out there that night? More than 20 years later, we still don't know. And maybe the scariest part is she wasn't doing anything risky, just going out with friends in a college town on a night meant for fun. But sometimes that's all it takes. And our next case is way older and way stranger. A man dies alone, brutally beaten, locked in a room. Yeah, this one gets real weird. Room 1046. Okay, so it's January 2nd, 1935 in downtown Kansas, Missouri. The Great Depression is still wrecking everyone's lives. A man walks into the President Hotel and asks for a room. Not just any room, though. He specifically wants one that faces the inside of the building. Kinda weird, right? He says his name is Roland T. Owen and from Los Angeles. And get this, the only things he's carrying are a comb and a toothbrush. That's it. But it's the Depression, and the hotel isn't about to turn down someone actually willing to pay. So, whatever. They hand him a key to room 1046 on the 10th floor. And that's when things start getting seriously off. Over the next couple of days, the hotel staff start noticing weird stuff. Owen keeps his room crazy dark, with blinds drawn and one tiny lamp on. When the maid comes by to clean, he's like, "Don't bother, my friend's still asleep." Except there's no friend. She doesn't see anyone. Also, when staff came to the door, Owen only cracks it open enough to talk through. Won't even open it properly, and he kept glancing over his shoulder like someone's about to jump him. Eventually, one maid actually gets a better look. She notices Owen has a cauliflower ear and a scar on his head, like he's been in some serious fights before. And there was a note sitting on the desk. It says, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." Nobody knows who he is. On January 3rd, things get even weirder. The maid swings by around 4 p.m., but Owen tells her through the door that he's got a visitor. From inside, she hears a man's voice say, "I don't want that to happen." When she comes back later, Owen's just sitting there in the dark, looking like he's barely hanging on. And then, in early morning, January 4th, guests on the 10th floor start hearing noises from room 1046, like someone getting slammed against the walls and a voice of pleading. "No, don't. Then it all goes quiet. Around 7 a.m., the hotel switchboard gets a call from room 1046. Someone asks, "Where is Dawn? I'm looking for Dawn." Then the line goes dead. At that point, the front desk sends a bellhop to check it out. He knocks, and a weird voice says, "Come in." Problem is, the door was locked, so Pike uses his passkey, and what he finds inside, straight up nightmare fuel. Owen sprawled out and naked on the bed, blood everywhere. He's been stabbed, beaten, and his throat is splashed. The walls are splattered with blood, the floors, the bed. Somehow Owen's still barely alive. When the police get there and ask who did this to him, he mumbles, "Nobody. I fell against the bathtub." Before they can get anything else out of him, Owen slips into a coma, and he dies a few hours later in the hospital. And honestly, this is where the story spirals into straight chaos. Police tear apart room 1046 looking for clues. There's no clothes, no weapon, nothing normal. All they find is the weird note to Dawn, a hairpin, a safety pin, and an unopened bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. That's it. And when they try to figure out who Roland T. Owen even is, he doesn't exist. No ID, no matches. They plaster his photo all over newspapers, hoping people who know him come forward, but nobody does. Then it gets even stranger. A bartender comes forward and says he saw a guy matching Owen's description a few days earlier, and apparently the guy mentioned getting into trouble back in Los Angeles. Plus, another hotel across town says a dude matching Owen had stayed there too, under a different name. Oh, and an elevator operator says he saw a commercial woman, basically code for a night worker, visit room 1046 the night Owen got attacked. She wasn't alone either. There was a man with her. So yeah, layers on layers of mystery. Eventually, with no ID and no family, they buried Owen, or whoever he was, in a pauper's grave. But then, a year later, someone anonymously sends money to the funeral home so they could give him a real burial. They also sent a note. It just said, "Love forever, Louise." Who's Louise? No idea. Finally, in 1936, his real identity comes out. Turns out the dead man was Artemus Ogletree, a 17-year-old who had run away from his home in Birmingham, Alabama. His family recognized the cauliflower ear and scar from newspaper photos, but instead of answers, it just made things worse. Because after Artemus died, his mom kept getting letters, supposedly from Artemus, talking about him working on ships, traveling to Europe, going to Cairo. It was obviously fake, somebody pretending to be him to keep her from asking questions. To this day, nobody knows what really happened. Mob job? Secret lover? Shadowy Dawn with a vendetta? Your guess is as good as ours. Nearly 90 years later, the President Hotel is still there, but room 1046 has been renumbered. And if you thought that was unsettling, wait till you hear about what happened to ZIGMUND ADAMSKI. Because next up, it's not just about murder anymore. We're talking alien abduction. Tier 5. Dead ends and decade-old nightmares. ZIGMUND ADAMSKI. It's June 6, 1980, in a small mining village called Tingley in West Yorkshire, England. A coal miner named ZIGMUND ADAMSKI tells his wife he's going out to grab a few groceries. A simple trip. He's done it many times before. But this time, he never comes back. So his wife calls the police, and a search begins. They check everywhere, but nothing. It's like he vanished into thin air on the way to the shop. Then, 5 days later, something strange happens. A worker named Trevor Parker is doing his job at a coal yard in Todmorden, a town 20 miles away. He notices something strange on top of a 12-foot-high coal pile. At first, he thinks it's a mannequin, but it's not. It's ZIGMUND ADAMSKI, and he's dead. That's when things get really weird. ZIGMUND is dressed, but not properly. He's wearing a suit, but his shirt is missing. His shoes are tied wrong. His jacket is buttoned oddly, like someone else dressed him in a hurry. His wallet and watch are gone. And what made it double weird was the coal pile. It was completely undisturbed. There was no footprints, no drag marks, no signs that anyone climbed up there or carried him. It looked like he had been dropped from the sky. Then there were burns. ZIGMUND had strange round burns on his neck, shoulders, and head. They were smooth and clean, almost like welts, and they were covered in a weird green gel. The police sent the gel to a lab, but the scientists had no idea what it was. The tests came back inconclusive. The autopsy said ZIGMUND died from a heart attack, likely caused by extreme stress or fear. But here's the strange part. His body was fresh. He had only been dead a few hours before being found. So the big question is, where was he for the other 5 days? Because he was clearly alive for the most of it. ZIGMUND didn't have a car. He had no reason to be in Todmorden. No enemies. No obvious reason to vanish. Some thought he was kidnapped by humans, maybe tortured or experimented on. That would explain the burns and the mystery gel. Others thought he might have seen something he shouldn't have, and someone silenced him. Then things got even stranger. One of the officers who worked the case, Alan Godfrey, claimed later that year he had a UFO encounter. He said he was unconscious and woke up with marks on his body. So naturally, people started connecting the dots. What if he was abducted by aliens? Maybe they experimented on him and dropped him back, but something went wrong. It sounds wild, but nothing else made sense either. Even the coroner admitted it was the strangest case he'd ever seen. He still wrote heart attack on the death certificate, but everyone knew something else had happened. ZIGMUND's wife died, never knowing the truth. To this day, it remains one of the UK's real-life X-Files. And if that gave you chills, wait until the next one. 5 children, a burning house, not a single bone found. The Sodder children disappearance. It's Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family's getting ready for the holidays. Big meal, presents, decorations. George and Jenny Sodder were Italian immigrants that lived in a 2-story house with their 10 children. That night, some of the older kids stayed up playing with toys. And around midnight, George and Jenny head to bed. At 1 a.m., the phone rings. Jenny answered it in a half-asleep state. A strange woman is on the line, asking for someone Jenny doesn't know. But after Jenny answered it, the woman laughs weirdly and hangs up. Creepy, but Jenny brushes it off and goes back to sleep. 30 minutes later, she wakes up again. This time because she smells smoke. The house is on fire. George and Jenny rush to get out with 4 of their children, Marion, John, George Jr., and little Sylvia. But 5 kids are still trapped upstairs. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. George tries everything. He goes for the ladder, but it's gone. Later, they find it thrown far down a hill. He tries to start his trucks to climb the 2nd floor, but both are mysteriously dead, even though they worked earlier that day. They call the fire department, but it's chaos. The fire chief can't be reached, and the truck doesn't arrive until the next morning. By sunrise, the Sodder house is nothing but ashes. Officials say the 5 children probably burned to death. They tell the family there would be nothing left to find. But that's not what happened. Even in the worst house fires, there will be bones left, but not a single bone, tooth, or trace of a body. Jenny isn't convinced. She even burns chicken bones in the fireplace to test what would happen to her kids. And the bones don't turn to ash. That experiment convinces her even more that her children didn't die in the fire. And then, the family remembers all the strange things that happened before the fire. A man came asking for work. He pointed to their fuse box and said, "This will cause a fire someday." George had a fight with another man over anti-Mussolini views. The kids said they saw shadows around the house days before the fire. One witness even claimed to see the kids inside a car as the house was still burning. George and Jenny became sure that their children were taken. They put up a massive billboard along Route 16 with their children's photos and the words, "What happened to our children?" They offered a reward, followed every tip. George even traveled across states chasing leads. Then, nearly 20 years later, Jenny received a photo in the mail with no return address. The boy in the photo looked just like Louis, now grown up. At the back read, "Louis Sodder, I love my brother Frankie, Illil boys, A90132 or 35. So they hired a private investigator, but they vanished too. George died in 1969 and Jenny in 1989. Neither got answers. To this day, no one knows what happened to those 5 children. Paula Jean Weldon. It's December 1, 1946, in Bennington, Vermont. An 18-year-old college student named Paula Jean Weldon finishes her shift at the Bennington College Dining Hall. She changes into a bright red parka, puts on some walking clothes, and tells her roommates she's going for a short hike on the long trail nearby. It's cold, but not dangerous. Just some fresh snow on the ground. A peaceful afternoon walk. She catches a ride part of the way there. Around 4 p.m., a couple sees her walking and gives her directions. She's not carrying a backpack or any gear. Just a quick walk, she said. She planned to be back by dinner, but Paula never comes back. By the next day, when she doesn't show up for class, people get worried. Then the panic sets in. Vermont launches the biggest search in its history at the time. Soldiers, local police, students, even bloodhounds all join the effort. They search for her for weeks, but they find nothing. No coat, no tracks, no clues. It's like she walked into the woods and just disappeared. So the theories start flying. Some say Paula ran away to start a new life, but her parents don't believe it. She left behind her paycheck. She wasn't carrying money. No relationship drama, no arguments, no reason to leave. Others think maybe something bad happened. Maybe she crossed paths with a stranger on the trail. A local man even bragged in a bar that he knew where she was buried, so the police brought him in. He got scared and took it back. Another dead end. Then came the sightings. Someone claimed they saw her in Quebec. Another lead pointed to Colorado, but nothing ever checked out. Some believed Paula's red coat made her a target for hunters, but it wasn't hunting season, and there was no blood and no remains. The investigation was messy. Back then, Vermont didn't even have a state police force. No one knew who was in charge, and valuable time was lost. In fact, Paula's case pushed Vermont to create a state police the following year. So, in a strange way, that's part of her legacy. But here's what's really chilling. Paula wasn't the only one who disappeared in that area. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people vanished in the same region. An old man vanished after stepping off a bus. A skilled hunter disappeared without a trace. 2 others simply never returned from the woods. People started calling it the Bennington Triangle, Vermont's version of the Bermuda Triangle. Some blamed the land itself, like old legends, cursed mountains, weird vortexes that swallow people whole. Others pointed to natural dangers like unmarked cliffs, hidden caves, or even strange wind patterns. But nothing explains how 5 people could vanish without a trace. And if she chose to walk into the woods, Charles Morgan didn't choose anything. He vanished and came back terrified, and soon after was found dead with a $2 bill and a coded message. That's next. Tier 6. Obscure, obsessive, and possibly forgotten. Charles Morgan. So, this is Chuck Morgan's story in Tucson, Arizona, 1977. He was 39, ran an escrow company, had a wife and kids, until one day in March when he just disappeared. His family panicked. 3 days later, Chuck stumbles back home in a state that defies explanation. His hands are bound with plastic cuffs. A zip tie is wrapped around his neck. He's missing a shoe, and he can't talk. Turns out someone coated his throat with a hallucinogenic drug to paralyze his vocal cords. He managed to scrawl notes to his wife, explaining he'd been kidnapped and tortured by hitmen, but somehow he got away. Then comes the wild part. Chuck told his wife he'd worked undercover for the Treasury Department, helping expose mob-connected land fraud, like some suburban James Bond in loafers. Whoever grabbed him smeared a toxin on his throat to paralyze his voice, just in case he got any bright ideas about snitching. He refused to call the cops, saying involving law enforcement would be a death warrant for his whole family. For weeks, Chuck lived in constant terror, wearing a bulletproof vest everywhere. He told his father, "If anything happens to me, there's a letter hidden somewhere explaining everything." And then, on June 18th, about 3 months later, they find him dead in the desert 40 miles outside of Tucson. He's been shot in the back of the head and was still wearing his bulletproof vest. His own gun was nearby the crime scene and unfired. But here's what made it weird. There was a $2 bill covered with cryptic code slipped inside his underwear. 7 Spanish names and a crude map pointing to the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City. On the back, the signers of the Declaration of Independence are numbered 1 to 7, with Ecclesiastes 12 scribbled in margin and arrows to the serial numbers 1 and 8. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verses 1 to 8 talks about dust returning to earth and the spirit to God. Deep stuff. There are sunglasses in his car that weren't his, and around the time he died, his wife got a call from a Green Eyes who claimed to be with Chuck in his final moments and said he left a letter for the authorities. No letter ever surfaced, unless that $2 bill was the letter. Local cops wrote it off as suicide. Some bizarre theory about Chuck tying a string to the trigger and shooting himself in the back of the head. Almost nobody bought it. Everything pointed to a professional hit. Rumors flew that Chuck's escrow work had him tangled up in money laundering for organized crime or land fraud schemes. The FBI supposedly had eyes on him before he died. Years later, someone claimed a hitman was paid $25,000 to kill him, though that never got confirmed. The $2 bill code never cracked. Were those map clues to a final expose? Was Chuck an informant gone rogue, or just in too deep to climb out? We'll probably never know. His death stays unsolved. Part government conspiracy thriller, part mob hit, and all mystery. Chuck Morgan took his secrets to the grave, leaving behind a stunned wife and kids, and one of Arizona's most baffling crime scenes. The Kolb skeleton. It's 1976 in Grand Canyon, Arizona. Emery Kolb, a famous photographer who spent decades capturing the canyon's beauty, has just passed away at the age of 95. He had lived right on the edge of the South Rim, running his photo studio for years. After his death, workers began turning his old studio into a museum. They found a locked storage room Kolb had kept shut for decades. Inside the room was a dusty canvas sack, and inside the sack, a mummified skeleton with a bullet hole right through the skull. Imagine finding a dead body hidden in your grandpa's attic. That's how shocking this discovery was. People immediately started asking, who was this? And pretty soon, a familiar name came up. Back in 1928, Glenn Hyde and his wife Bessie vanished during their honeymoon rafting trip through the canyon. Their boat was found floating, perfectly fine, but the couple was never seen again. Their disappearance is one of the canyon's oldest mysteries. Kolb had actually helped in the search for them back then. So when a skeleton showed up in Kolb's studio, people got excited. Was this Glenn Hyde? Had Kolb found the body and hidden it? Or, in a darker twist, did Kolb kill Glenn himself? Before the mystery could get too far, forensic experts came in with the answers. The skeleton wasn't Glenn. It was a young man, yes, probably under 30, just like Glenn was. But the body dated from the 1940s or 1950s, not 1928. Plus, the dental records and facial features didn't match. So the mystery just got stranger. If it wasn't Glenn, who was it? One theory is that Kolb, who once served as a reserve deputy, may have found the body while exploring the canyon. Maybe he brought it back to keep it safe from animals and weather. But then, for some reason, he never told anyone. Others believe something darker. Maybe the man was a drifter or worker who died near Kolb's home. Maybe it was a murder or an accident Kolb didn't want to explain. If it was a suicide, why lock the body in a hidden room? And the biggest question, why did Kolb stay silent? Even in his 90s, giving daily tours of the studio, smiling for cameras, never once did he say, by the way, there's a skeleton behind that wall. He took that secret to his grave. The Grand Canyon is full of hidden tragedies, missing hikers, lost explorers. But this mystery was literally found inside a legend's home. And yet, it raised more questions than answers. Today, the Kolb skeleton sits in a medical examiner's office. No name, no case solved.